Good morning on this Tuesday morning. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Take for Market Rebellion. I'll tell you what, how many people, honestly, raise your hands, Evergrande, you ever heard of it before? Well, you do now, and absolutely, yesterday, the influence that had on the markets as soon as it hit in the pre-markets, the storyline and the default risks and blah, 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 all of that kind of thing. Yep, markets were absolutely getting hit. Down 700 in the pre-market. We did get a little bit of a rally off of that. Then we started to sell off once again. Actually, we hit well over 900 points to the downside in the Dow. But again, you look at that last 45 minutes, we cut that down significantly. We actually finished the day down about 600, just a little over 600 points to the downside. So not great, but certainly well off of those lows that we're pushing towards being down 1,000 points. Now, next, take a look over at the NASDAQ. Similar story. Now that on the lows actually was down as much as close to 500 points. It, in the last 45 minutes, got a nice little ratchet higher and actually finished down still pretty poorly, but 330 points. So off of the lows, but still an absolute beating for the markets yesterday. Now, a lot of folks were wondering, well, what would happen tomorrow? What will happen now today? Well, we'll get into that in a second, but I can tell you this, volatility is here at least to stay for now. And yesterday, volatility certainly was the name of the game. We had volatility range from 24 to 29, finished closer to 25 after they got that nice rally late in the day, as I say, the last 45 minutes. And we've seen that kind of movement in the past as well. Crude hanging right around 71. You had the 10-year right around 1.3. So you don't see a lot of movement there. Bitcoin, now that was down fairly significantly. It was down anywhere between 7-10% on the lower end. And overnight last night, Bitcoin hit once again, but recovered pretty nicely and is actually back and trading in a much closer range to where we were yesterday. We were right around that 43,000, 44,000. We had a beating last night in there. Now, you got to take a look at some of the volumes that we had yesterday. And the interesting part about this is very much like the sector participation to the downside, it wasn't just one sector. It wasn't just tech. It wasn't just energy. It wasn't industrials. It wasn't just financials. All of them moving almost in lockstep. But the same thing can be said. Take a look at the volumes that we traded yesterday. 48.8 million contracts. Now, we've been over 50 million on occasions as well. That kind of a day like we had yesterday, especially with some of that reversal late in the day, a lot of people trying to, maybe pick a bottom, so to speak. And if that was the case, maybe, but the interesting part is the only stock that actually traded more than 1 million contracts yesterday was Apple. Everything else, just broadly, just activity everywhere, but not just focused on one or two or three names to build up a huge percentage of what we were really seeing. So a monster day there. But just to get through it, energy was down 3%, consumer discretionary was down about 2.5%, financials down a little over 2.25%. Materials down about 2%. Tech was down close to 2%. Semiconductors down about 2.5%. I could go on and on. Biotech, you could go to subsectors, whatever. It was a very broad selling that we were seeing yesterday. No doubt about that. One area, there was one little area that stood out for me, and I just got to pass it along to you because we're looking at these markets get hit to the downside, all these various stories. And for some reason, one of the areas that looked a little bit stronger, at least than everywhere else, were the airlines. And it was really interesting to see. We had Delta, we had American, we had Southwest, we had United. They were actually in positive territory, up maybe 1 or 2 or 3%. Very, very interesting to see that. But the weakness that we had seen across the board in the materials space, Nucor and Freeport and U.S. Steel and those kinds of names, Chinese names, of course, attached to this whole storyline, those were getting beat down pretty good too. PDD, JD, Baidu, all those names. Tesla was down about 4%. Caterpillar was down about 4.5%. So you looked around, it was very, very difficult to find areas of the marketplace that didn't have a pretty good pace with most everybody else, except for those airlines. So we come in today, a lot of people very excited about, hey, we are going to bounce. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Well, it looked pretty good early on, up about 250 points. We built on that a little bit. We were up over 200 points in the open. Then suddenly we were up almost 300 points by the first half hour or so. Then we started to leak right back out again. As a matter of fact, the last time I looked at it, we were trading about 130 points in positive, but about 130 points to the upside. I just took a glance. We're up about 90 points. The NASDAQ has been slipping all throughout the morning. It was up 100 points in the pre. We were up 90 at the open. We actually had a nice little rise like the rest of the markets around 9 o'clock. That's Central Time. And then the next half hour just sort of leaked right back out as well. As a matter of fact, last time I looked, that was trading down, or excuse me, up about 20 points. I just took a quick flash. It's up about 50 points right now. So hanging in there and nothing terrible, but it's interesting to see the reaction and not being able to hold on to some of that. We talk about volatility all the time. 23 to 24, it looks like the range that we've been in, 23 and a half, has been somewhere where we find ourselves. Crude once again, 71, 10-year once again, 1.3. I look at these sectors now, something that was really interesting early on. Energy was up right out of the gate. That was the leading sector. It was up well over 1%. Well, before you know it, you just blink, and the next thing I look, I see energy was actually down about 0.25%, maybe 0.3% to the downside. So we're seeing these radical moves and these very, very rapid, the velocity of these moves has been absolutely incredible. Matter of fact, at the opening, there was no sector in the red. And then suddenly we started to see a little bit of that leaking out, and all of a sudden some of the flips and some of the movement within all those various sectors. And yep, that's exactly where you find yourself. As a matter of fact, financials actually have been trading reasonably well, given the circumstances as well. So what's really under pressure so far this morning? Casinos. And everybody seems to want to say, well, I'm going to buy the bottom of the casinos. That happened maybe a couple of months ago, let's be honest. Then a month or two ago. And then a couple days ago. And then yesterday. And they just keep on slipping a little bit lower and a little bit lower. And I'll tell you, I was very fortunate because with these casinos, the concerns of not only just the COVID, but also when you add in some of the variants and Macau itself having some of the issues that they have had, it's just kind of kept me away. We've had a lot of option activity. They've come after Las Vegas Sands. I can't tell you how many times. Haven't been right in a very, very long time. That means that I have to stay away from that area. I have been staying away from that. At some point, get right back into it. I was looking at it today. We had some activity in MGM. That turned out to not be right very, very rapidly. So I'm pretty pleased that I've just kind of stuck to my guns and putting my hands in my pockets, staying away from some of these casinos, at least for right now. Peloton was up a little bit today, not a huge number, but 1.5%, maybe 2%. It's been hovering. You take a look at Peloton, hovering near that 100 level for what seems like a really long time. Oddly enough, interesting to see that some of the Chinese names today actually in the green, PDD, and I take a look over at Baidu and some of these names actually in the green today. So a couple of unusuals and we're out of here. And I have nothing else as far as CNBC or anything for the rest of the afternoon. So a lot of other obligations, but nothing with CNBC. So here's my unusuals. I'm going to give you Uber. Stock was trading about 42.75. CEO was just on TV not too terribly long ago. 5,500 of the September 24th expiring, that's Friday, September 24th expiring calls. The 45 strike, they were going for 12 cents to 32 cents. So inexpensive in terms of premium, but a very quick move is needed. So you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's just got to get up and above 45. It's already jumped a little bit. I saw last I looked a little bit over 43. They started buying at 42.75. Next, I've got Faraday. Now, this one's pretty interesting. Not a name that we see all the time back in the EV space. Yesterday on the halftime, we had Lucid. That name was at 23. Now it got up and over 25 today. Those options have absolutely exploded to the upside, both the 25s and I mentioned there were some extra buyers of the 28s. Those do expire fairly rapidly as well. So Faraday is the next one. These are Friday's expirations, September 24th. 2,200 of the 11 calls were purchased, 40 cents to 55 cents for those calls. There are names in the EV space, and the EV space continues to be very, very active, and we continue to see some of the options that are being bought in various names. Are they always right? Absolutely not. But it's been very, very consistently buying and seeing, and oftentimes seeing pretty rapid moves to the upside. We'll see on this one. Very, very interesting name. We don't know it as well as we know some of the other names, but I'll tell you what, very, very interesting to see. Knowledge is king. Understand the options world. If you don't have that understanding, please go and see the guys at Market Rebellion. They do an absolutely unbelievable job of educating. And as I mentioned, nearly 50 million contracts yesterday. We talk about 40 million almost on a daily basis as far as the options world. That is where the growth is. Folks, have a great day of trading.